Welcome to Go Get Great, the podcast for aspiring entrepreneurs and ambitious small business owners. I'm your host, Brittany, owner of Brittany Miller Socials and mother of 3. Go Get Great is all about helping you make life and business work together. You'll learn about the fumbles that helped get me and my guests to where we are today so you don't have to make them. So come join the journey with Go Get Great. Good morning, and then welcome to another episode of the Go Get Great podcast. I am excited to welcome today's guest. His name is Kyle Fowler, and he is the owner of Financial Flippers. So Kyle decided when he was very young that he wanted to be an artist, and he thought with that came the starving artist archetype. But he has learned since then that he does not have to be a victim of his financial situation. And at the time of 32, he was traveling the world performing. He got married, made some new purchases for his lifestyle that put him in an unfortunate financial situation, which he'll share more about in our episode today. And in 2018, they decided that enough was enough, and they decided that they were going to get rid of all of their consumer debt. And they did exactly that in 26 months, paying off a grand total of $114,000. Wow. So Kyle is joining us on the podcast today to talk about how to do this, if this is something that you need to do, and share his experience. We also have a fun conversation about his time working as a performer at Disney too. So I'm very excited to get started. Welcome, Kyle.
All right. Well, welcome, Kyle, to the Go Get Great podcast. I just introduced you in the intro, but I'd love for you to get started by introducing yourself in your own words, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, thanks for having me here.
Yeah.
My background's a little interesting. So I went to school for music theater. I'm here in the States. I know you're up in Canada.
Yeah.
I've spent a lot of time in Canada because Disney Cruise Line actually rehearses up in Toronto. So I've done several of those ships, but spent a lot of time living in New York. And then now my wife and I, after COVID, and we were working in Disney World as performers, pivoted, and now we live in Charlotte in North Carolina. But over the course of kind of the past several years, starting in 2018, my wife and I started budgeting for the first time in our lives. And that kind of took us through the process of paying off 114 grand in debt, and really kind of changed the trajectory of our lives in a way that we didn't really understand, I think, but believed, if that makes sense. And so that process is what started the whole financial coaching aspect of what it is that I do. So I started Financial Flippers with the idea of helping people flip the script of their financial story, because we talk to ourselves and we talk to each other about money in very, I don't want to say damaging ways, but in ways that aren't necessarily positive. And it can definitely eke its way into other aspects of our lives, because money is so woven into pretty much every aspect of our lives. And so that's kind of what brought me here today.
Well, we are so excited to have you. And you do have such an incredible personal story, which is why I wanted to invite you on the podcast to share that. But I know that it was a result of hardship, but that one that you've overcome. So I just want to congratulate you on that, because that is a huge amount of financial burden to remove for yourself and your wife. So kudos to you for that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And not only that, but on top of that, you have now built an incredible business helping other people do the same, which I think is great, because money is definitely one of those topics that is super taboo. And it's unfortunate, because I feel like so many people are in this state where they have this debt and they don't really have the tools or resources in and of themselves to get out from under it. But talking about it feels very overwhelming. I know personally, I grew up in a household that did not talk about money in a very positive way. So I very much have been learning as I've been going, and I've been fortunate that my education has covered a lot of that, but I know not everyone is in that same position. So I'm excited to have you share what you've learned with our audience today. Yeah, so you had a very similar upbringing by the sounds of it. I was wondering how that impacted you, having parents that didn't really discuss money openly with you.
Sure. So I think that all of these are such big topics, right, for us to talk about. So my wife and I both say that we didn't grow up in homes that talked about money. It doesn't mean that we grew up in homes that didn't have love, if that makes sense. So I think that the first thing that I want to make clear is that if you grow up in a house that doesn't talk about money, it doesn't mean that necessarily the person did not love you or did not care about you.
Mhm.
Really, we are kind of products of our environment, right? And so society in general tells us that it's taboo to talk about money, which I think is crazy because, like I said just a minute ago, it's woven into almost every aspect of our lives. You know,
Mhm.
if you think about a certain aspect of your life, I would be shocked if money doesn't touch that aspect in some way,
Mhm.
shape, or form. So, but the downside to that is that if we are products of our kind of environment, our parents are products of that environment, that's just kind of what's been passed down. And what's not taught for us here in the schools, and I'm assuming it's the same up in Canada too, is that we're not really taught about how money works. And my whole philosophy is that there's too many opinions about money, right? And so nobody can agree on anything, and so not one person can get the check for, writing that curriculum.
Mhm.
Whereas I think we should just agree that people should learn about money at the
Mhm.
beginning. But I think that what it does when we are living in a society that doesn't want to talk about money is it just kind of exacerbates this problem where we not only don't know how to talk to others about money, but we also don't know how to talk to ourselves about money. So we don't understand it inside or outside. And then when people talk to us, well, let me rephrase. I always felt like growing up, I thought people talked at me about money.
Mhm.
And so they would direct, you should do this, or you should be doing this, you should be saving money. Like I remember my folks saying, you shouldn't buy a brand new car because you'll lose money pretty quickly, right? It's a
Mhm.
depreciating asset.
Mhm.
I remember that phrase, but like I didn't understand it when I was a kid.
Mhm.
And I remember being told you should save your money, you shouldn't spend it when I would cut lawns or things like that. But that's not really teaching around the topic of money, right? And so
Mhm.
if money is already uncomfortable, then asking questions is going to be uncomfortable. And so I think at the core, people aren't really asking questions because they don't feel comfortable asking those questions because it's such a vulnerable and emotional topic.
Mhm. That makes sense. It really does. And I feel like a lot of the questions we learn to ask our parents are further conversations of what is taught in school. And like you mentioned, it's really not taught in school about money. We are maybe a little bit more ahead of the game than the US. I worked for a nonprofit for a while, and we would be invited into classrooms to do full day presentations, teaching kids actually as early as grade 4 all the way through to high school about different components of managing money, which was great. But not every student had access to that because it was based on funding that we had and the invites of the teachers into the classrooms.
Of course.
So there's still a long way to go, but that's definitely something that, yeah, I could see more potential in. So after hearing your personal story, I'm really curious what was actually included in your $114,000 in debt when you started paying it off.
Well, I'm glad that you asked because I actually brought a prop. I
Ooh,
mean, my background's in
love it.
theater, so I brought a prop. You can't see it because my screen's blurred. But this is a debt payoff calculator, or not calculator, but debt payoff thermometer
Love it.
that my wife and I kind of filled out as we went along. So I'm going to
Mhm.
read some of these off. At the beginning, it was $107,328.49. But
Okay.
after we finished, there were a couple other items that we hadn't included on the beginning.
Mm.
There were some back taxes that we owed to the IRS, and all of that totaled up to, I think it was $4 shy of 114,000. So I did round up.
Okay.
I hope that's okay.
Yeah.
Let's see. So we had my wife had a credit card. I had a credit card. She had another credit card. We had a Macy's credit card, which was it was probably bed sheets and pillows and a
Mm.
mattress, if I'm thinking correctly. We both had a car. We had furniture for the new house that we had moved into.
Mm.
We had another credit card that was a joint card that we actually paid off with a personal loan, which was another debt that we had. We paid it off with the personal loan, but then racked it back up and maxed it back
Mm.
out.
Hmm.
And then the last huge chunk of it was student loans.
Okay. Okay.
And then, and then there was the kind of the back taxes and extra interest and our phones and things like that.
That makes sense. Okay. I'm asking because I know that you guys started that journey a few years ago. And since then, we've seen a lot of inflation from things like groceries and mortgage payments. And I wondered whether that included your mortgage. I was like, I know things are less expensive in the States, but man, if that was all your debt, including your mortgage too, I was like, I wish.
That'd be wicked, right?
Yeah, it would be. Okay. So it's anything but the mortgage. That makes it
Correct. Yeah. So consumer debt.
more. It's consumer debt. Okay, I wasn't
Yeah.
sure. I did do some Googling before our episode today, though, and I have some, well, interesting numbers for me to share. Maybe not so much for you, but I wanted to know what the average debt load was for Canadians now in 2023 because of all this inflation. So, according to a report that I found online, the average debt load for Canadians is just over $21,000, also excluding mortgages. So, this would be consumer debt. And some personal information. We actually just bought a second car last week because we've been neglecting having one for a while and we needed it. But regardless, with that, before the car purchase, we would have been just under that amount. With that now, we have about $37,000 in consumer debt. So we are actually over the Canadian average, which is terrifying for me to say out loud, but I feel like for anyone else listening, especially other business owners and parents who've been on maternity leave for a long time, I want to kind of acknowledge that as much as this number sucks and it scares me personally, I feel like I'm probably not the only one. And I want other people to like know and normalize that. Also, our mortgage is just under $400,000 now. So like we owe a lot of money. And it's crazy that there are so many people, including ourselves, in the situation of owing so much money. And at some points in time, I also feel very powerless and unable to find a plan to get out of it. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today. It's been a long time since I've been debt-free. Obviously, you have more experience with that. So tell us what it feels like when we reach the other side of this mountain.
So this is another topic that I think is really interesting because I was thinking about it. I'm a big journaler, and so I was thinking like, oh, like what have I written about this? And it's changed our lives in ways that we didn't see coming, if that makes sense. Okay. However, the day that we paid everything off, there weren't like tears and confetti, and we took an Instagram photo, and but the thing is that managing the money is simply a skill, and it's a skill that we don't learn. So that comes with like us not learning about money right at a younger age. How do I save it? How do I spend it? What does spending look like? What is debt? As a kid, I just assumed when I would see signs for, homes for, the low 400s, I was like, I guess people just have this much money. So I guess I'll be okay to be able to afford a house because my parents have a house. So I'm sure I'll be fine. Not understanding the concept really of mortgages and debt and all that kind of stuff. So paying it off didn't exactly feel different because we'd already been exercising these skills for the past 26 months. What was different was our lives after. So we paid off all of our debt in February of 2020. It was the middle of February. And the OCD part of me was like, we could have done it in 24 months. And we probably could have, but we also wanted to live life at the same time. We didn't want to feel like we're quote unquote sacrificing. I think sacrificing is a choice. And we made a choice to simply extend probably a few months, maybe, in order to have the life that we did as we're paying things off so we didn't burn out. So the lifestyle didn't really change. Like we felt good. I think I bought myself some AirPods, and I think my wife bought herself something that was like our treat, right? And then the month after we paid things off, that's when COVID hit. And so as entertainers, we lost our jobs immediately, and we still have friends that haven't been brought back. And it's almost 2024, right? So we knew that we weren't really going to be brought back anytime soon. However, during COVID, we weren't worried. Like it changes your worry about money because you understand how to buckle down. You understand how money feels differently, right? When I was younger, I did this thing called fuzzy math where I would just be like, I think there's that much in the account. Yeah, I should be fine. And then it like doesn't go through and you're like, wait a minute. And then, something came out for $10 and you're like, I forgot. But I would just do fuzzy math my entire life. And it got me through, but I never really progressed anywhere. And there was another episode that happens that I'll share. So in 2020, my wife and I had a French bulldog named Bailey, who was 6 years old, and she like one night randomly got really sick and started doing things differently, and we were like, that's weird. So we took her to the emergency clinic, and they said, well, she needs to go see like a specialist now. And so we had to go take her to a specialist the next morning. And then they called us in the car because we couldn't go in, and they said, hey, so your dog needs an immediate surgery or you say goodbye right now. And it was like, oh my God. And so the surgery was like a little over $6,000. It was probably about $6,400. And we didn't know what the result was going to be. We didn't know if she would make it through. We didn't know if it was going to be cancer or not. We didn't really know, but she needed a splenectomy. That's the surgery. And then come to find out after that surgery, she had hemangiosarcoma, which is a really aggressive cancer. So we did lose our dog. However, we got 2 months with our dog because we chose to go through with the surgery because we had the option to do it. So I think that, and I only tell that story because it changes the options that you have in life. And really that is what changes for you. It's not about, oh, I can live this lavish lifestyle. Oh, I can buy everything that my heart wants. I mean, your dreams, instead of saying, oh, must be nice. If you're looking at somebody else who's living a more opulent lifestyle, you go, that's going to be really cool, because your dreams start to become reality. You start forecasting differently because things are more planned. The money things, it's math, right? And so I don't say that to try to make it sound quote unquote simple, because again, we didn't know any of this when we started, right? But being able to put a plan in place and say, okay, if I save this much per month, then I know that if I stick to that, then this is going to be the result, right? And so it just changes the landscape of the options that you have in life. You know, even something as simple as moving to a different state, you know, moving is very expensive. And so the option for moving could be something.
Oh, I really like how you phrase that it opens and gives more options. Now, for those of us that are listening and want to increase our options, can you share with us some of the strategies that you use to tackle your debt?
Sure. So there are different methods for paying off your debt. And there's a little bit of an echo, a little bit of a lag.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay. I just letting you know. So anyway, some of the options are you can pay it off with the lowest interest rate first. You can pay it off with the lowest balance. You can pay it off with the lowest or highest payment. There's different strategies that you can make. And so really it's about finding the strategy that's best for you, right? And so my wife and I chose to do what's called the debt snowball. So what we did is we took the lowest balance and paid the lowest balance off first, and then just went to the highest balance. The reason why we did that is because we needed the emotional wins. We were less worried about a dollar amount. It would have saved us. Yeah, it would have saved us maybe $1,000 or $2,000 at the end of the day. But that wasn't really worth risking not feeling the momentum and not burning out. However, there are some people who are very dollar driven. And so if the interest is high, they want to nail that, you know, and get that out. Some people are worried more about the cash flow. And so they want to pay the highest payment first, you know, whatever loan that is. So there's different ways that you can do it. There's different methods. And really it's about choosing the method that's best for you. But what I say and what I kind of teach is that you need to get payment specific. So really focus on one debt at a time, get focused on paying that one first, and then move on to the next one. I think when we try to spread our dollars too many directions, it can only go so far. And so we feel less momentum, and we thrive on momentum, right? And so the more momentum we can give ourselves, the more successful I believe we'll be.
I like that. I think that makes a lot of sense. It's that sense of accomplishment you get when you pay off a debt or make progress towards your goal that really propels you and drives you to continue doing that. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you have a resource available for anyone that's listening. I think it's called the Debt GPS, Debt Get Payment Specific, maybe, that I saw on your website. So
Yeah.
I'll link it in the show notes, but if you kind of want to mention a little bit more about what that is for anyone listening, that would be great.
Sure. So it's called the Debt GPS, which stands for Get Payment Specific. So if somebody needs a little bit of direction on how to pay things off, what I did is I looked for a calculator online that could do this, and I couldn't find one that was free. And so I wanted to be able to provide that resource for people. So if you just go to financialflippers.com/GPS, you'll be able to download that tool for free.
Awesome. I like that. And I think that that will be really helpful for people. Now I have a bit of a follow-up, because I know a lot of the people that listen to my podcast are entrepreneurs like myself, and our income is incredibly variable. So from a fundamental perspective, we understand the process of budgeting and making sure we're setting aside money each month to pay that debt, but it can be very challenging when our income does not match the numbers that we use in our calculations. So do you have any recommendations to kind of help with that?
Sure. So there's a couple things that I will say. There's a really great book called Profit First by Mike. Have you already talked about it? Mike Michalowicz?
Mike Wickhouse.
Yeah, Mike Wazowski?
A little bit, but go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so
wrong
anyway,
name.
wrong name. He wrote a really great book, and so that would be a good resource for your audience. But really, I think because as a performer, we have very irregular income too, right? We never really know what we're going to be thinking, and so what that does is it sticks us in this short-term mindset. It's hard for us to think long-term because we're going from gig to gig, or from job to job, or project to project, and so we lose sight of the long-term goals. So the first thing we have to do is give ourselves a little bit of grace, right? Understanding that nothing's on fire. We just need to understand, okay, well, something's not working as well as it could be. What can we do to help make this process a little bit better? And so one of the things that we can do is we can build what's called, so we have our emergency funds. You probably already talked about them before. Those are just off to the side for those kind of life emergencies, right? It turns those emergencies into financial inconveniences, right? What I say entrepreneurs or giggers, freelancers, independent contractors, anything like that should have is something called a Hills and Valley account. So what that is you're basically doing an emergency fund for the emergency fund. And that's your first line of defense for your business. So your income is not stable. And what we're doing is we're stabilizing that income, right? So your lowest months, whatever that is, you need to understand what your base budget is. So if you understand the minimum that you need to make your business function, right? The lowest month, the difference between those two, that's at minimum what you should have in that Hills and Valley account. So in those low months, you pull from that Hills and Valley account to help you meet the minimum requirements for what it is that you need. And in the months that you do really well, you just simply fill that back up. And it stabilizes what you're able to do. The key, though, is that the more, and this kind of goes to that Profit First book, the more money you have in the bank doesn't mean that you spend more. And so that's what we don't want to get into the trap of.
Yeah, I like that. I've never heard of a Hills and Valleys account, but I'm probably going to talk to my accountant after this and ask to put that in place. I do follow Profit First in my business, so I have mentioned it a few times on different podcasts for people, and I think it is a great resource. But even within that, following the percentages, which I do pretty consistently each month, it's still interesting for me to see that there's no money in the account, if that makes sense. Like I'm covering my payments, and like this month, or last month rather, I had a really good month. So that would have been a hill for me. And I was like, okay, cool. I'm going to see dollar amounts in my accounts now. And then I open it up and I'm like, okay, well, we paid the bills, but like, where are what I would have considered the extra dollars? So I have some homework to do with my bookkeeper to figure out what additional expenses I wasn't mentally accounting for. But yeah, so it's really helpful. And I really like that suggestion. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
So another question for you. The holidays are just around the corner, and this is a little bit more on the personalist side, but I know that it can be a very expensive season, especially because a lot of people like myself, and I try and watch what I'm spending and what I'm gifting, but one of my love languages, or how I express love, I guess, is gift giving. So it can feel emotionally devastating, I guess, when I don't have the budget to support my ambitions for the people that I want to show my appreciation to, which is okay. It's something that I just have to overcome myself. But do you have any recommendations for listeners to kind of help keep things stable or even move towards the positives during such a heavy expense season?
Sure. So I think that, again, I think giving yourself some grace, right? I'm also somebody who my love language is gifts. And so when my wife and I were going through paying off our debt, that was something that I was like, come on, like I can't give you gifts. I can't give gifts for this person. But I think that we feel like setting a boundary is a negative thing. And especially when it comes to our money. Money is extremely emotional, right? Now money is neutral, right? It's neither good nor bad. However, it can feel very emotional, the whole concept idea of money. And so we tie that into our love languages, of course. Oh, that's how I show you. Here's an example. When I proposed to my wife, she told me this later. She said yes, obviously, but she told me later that she was thinking, how am I ever going to pay him back for this kind of a gift? But which I found super interesting. I was like, well, it doesn't really matter because it's a gift. But I told her, I said, I need you to know. And we didn't really understand how to communicate this until we read the 5 Love Languages book. But I told her, I said, that was the easiest money I've ever spent. Just use the card. Yep. The easiest money I've ever spent. And so if our money and finances feel emotional, then why not use emotion when we fight those money issues in our lives, right? And so it's looking at situations differently. How can I show through an act of love that this person means something to me without feeling the need to have to spend, right? The other thing is we also feel like we have to keep up with everyone else around us. We feel like giving is the only way to really show somebody that we care, but that's not the only way that there is, right? And so being able to set those boundaries, I think, is something that we are not maybe conditioned for within our societies, but it is a skill and something that you should feel empowered to work on, and to exercise, that it's okay to say no. And there's a lot of really great lessons in that, whether you're doing that with kids, or whether you're doing that with a significant other or spouse or family, or a church, or, it doesn't really matter. Being able to set those boundaries for yourself, because at the end of the day, we can't pour from an empty cup, right? And if we feel like we just have to give and give in order to make who happy? Everybody else, right? But we have to protect our heart. There's a book that we read our 2-year-old daughter that in it says, protect your heart. And I love that phrase. Sometimes I really think that adults should read kids' books because there's a lot of really great lessons in there.
Yeah.
And so I think really protect your home. And when we're working towards financial goals, whether that's in business or in life or wherever, that's important because you establish those goals. Your budget is basically your goals on paper. That's what's important to you. When we don't know where our money's going and it's just kind of falling, it's not important enough for us to put it on paper and say, okay, well, this is more important. Where I'm going is more important. That kind of long-term mindset. When I talk to clients, I talk about, it's kind of like pulling the arrow back, right? It takes a little bit more focus, a little bit more patience, a little bit more strength, but we're going to go a lot farther and we're going to be more accurate when we get there.
I must say.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. I'm curious, if you don't mind, what's the name of the book that you read your daughter?
It's called I Like Myself, I believe.
Okay.
Or no, that's one of them. I think the one I refer to is My Wish for You. I think it's called My Wish for You.
Okay. I'll have to look into that one. It sounds like a good book to have on hand.
Yeah, it's a good one.
And I think that everything that you're saying makes 100% sense. It's just a case of putting it into perspective for people. And that's not the perspective we have of money and finances. Coming back to kind of that taboo topic, money is hard to make and easy to spend is like a mindset that I grew up with because that's how I heard my parents talk about money. And a lot of what I've been doing is, journaling and self-care and all of that. And, hearing that as a piece of the financial puzzle makes a lot of sense. It was like something clicked while you were talking. I was like, oh, well, if that's the case, that's going to be so easy to do now because I've already spent so much time working on my physical health and my mental health that now it's time to work on my financial health. And I think that that's going to kind of come nicely into the puzzle. So I hope everyone else that was listening kind of felt the same way about that as well. I feel like there was something else that I wanted to mention here because there was a lot of wisdom in what you just said, but hopefully it will come back to me. While I'm waiting for that to come back, I would love for you to share a little bit about your time working on the Disney cruise ships because that sounds absolutely fascinating.
Oh man. Well, I started working for Disney on the cruise ships, booked that out of New York with my wife. And so we actually got to travel together on the ships and work together. And so
Wow.
I will say this, working for Disney, because after the cruise ships, my wife and I worked at Disney World for the next 5 years until 2020. The job we love, or the company we love, and the company we work for are two different companies. And so being able to, this is what I tell people, because I would always have people say, I want to go do that, or I want to, and it's going to be all butterflies and rainbows. But I am somebody who likes to spike the Kool-Aid, because there are people who they drink the Kool-Aid and it feels so, not real to me. And then there are people who refuse to drink the Kool-Aid, and everything this, a company does is horrific. And it's like, no, you got to put a little bit of the realism with it. But that being said, I wouldn't trade my time working at Disney for anything. I loved it. There were ups and downs. It was of course like any job, but I don't regret working there at all. And the ships, if anybody listening has any desire to work on a cruise ship ever, then go get your butt on a ship and at least try it, because you can always say, you can always leave. It's like any other job, right? It just takes a little bit more commitment because you're away from family, you're away from friends. So we did miss events. Like we spent Christmases on ships. I couldn't go to certain weddings. I couldn't go to my aunt's funeral. There were, the first ship I worked on was Holland America Cruise Line, and they sat us down in a room, and this was before we sailed out. And they said, mother, father, sister, brother. That was how they started the conversation. And we went, what? And they said, only if one of those dies will you be allowed to leave the ship. We were like, whoa, all right. So now Disney was very different, right? But it's just a different lifestyle, right? But we got to travel all over the place. I was able to propose to my wife in Norway because we were able to sail as guests afterwards. She sailed with me. I did a replacement contract, and she sailed for free for a month. Being able to stay in my room. And so there were a lot of benefits, a lot of perks, a lot of cool stuff that we got to do. Didn't save nearly as much money as I would have liked to looking back, but it was absolutely worth it. And I would totally do it again.
I haven't obviously worked on a cruise ship before, but my parents did take us on a couple cruises when we were in high school, and it was a great experience. And we would talk to some of the people working there, and they spoke very highly of it. We were never on a Disney cruise. We were on Norwegian and Carnival, I think. But I did hear them say that it's usually a lot of long days, and then you have kind of days off a little bit when you hit the islands, which makes sense. Was it kind of a very different, I don't want to say work culture, but like work structure in terms of how and when you were performing?
So it depends on what area you work in. So with me, with entertainment, so like I said, kind of at the beginning, we spent about 2.5 months in Toronto rehearsing before we even went to the ship. Most people, they will just fly directly from their hometown or wherever their home airport is directly to the ship. So we did a lot of front end work, and that was, I think that was 6 days a week where we would be we would be working in rehearsals up in Toronto. When we got to the ship as entertainers, I mean, a busy week for us was like 30 hours was a busy week, because we would do shows almost every night. But that didn't mean that we were necessarily working during the day. Now, if you go to like the laundry or people that are working in food and bev or all the other, I mean, they're working 70, 80. I mean, they're working a lot of hours. So it just depends on what area you're in. So I would definitely look into that and what kind of experience you want to have while being on the ship, because it also limits the amount of time that you can be off the ship, right? But for us, we had a lot of time to interact with the guests and go see the ports and and play bodyguards for our friends Mickey and Minnie sometimes too.
That sounds fun. Now, did you enjoy working on the cruise ships more or at actual Disney?
Ooh. I think that in general, I enjoyed working on the ships. However, when I was on the ships, I longed for being on land. But when I was on land, I missed being on the ships. So the grass is, they say the grass is always greener, but, it just depends on what side of the fence you're standing on, right? So I think that my wanderlust type of heart loves the idea of the ship more and working on that. But I think when it comes to like having a life and a kid and family and all that kind of stuff, definitely being at Disney World was the experience that I enjoyed. And I mean, I still wouldn't trade my time at the park for anything at the parks.
Did you work at all of them or just one of the parks?
Yeah, I worked at all of them. So my home stage was Finding Nemo the Musical at Animal Kingdom. And then I also did Dapper Dan's at Magic Kingdom, Voices of Liberty at Epcot, spent some time with my good friend Christoph at Studios, and then did a few events and things like that.
It's been a really long time since I've been to Disney. Like I was little. So I would love to take my kids though. So if we go, what would you recommend as like your go-to parks or rides?
Oh my God. I always tell people that a trip to Disney World, because Disneyland is significantly smaller, right? A trip to Disney World, you can make the trip whatever you want it to be. Do you want to never see kids and just ride horses and go fishing? You can do that. Do you want to just be in really awesome hotels and have people wait on you hand and foot? Yep, you can have that kind of an experience. Do you want to not really spend any time in the hotels, but just spend all your time in the parks and rides? Then you can do that too. So really, I think it's what kind of experience do you want to have, and then kind of go from there. My wife, her full-time stage was Hoopty-Doo Review, which is still running, and not many people know about it, except those who have gone. It's a Civil War era saloon style kind of show, and it's dinner and the show, and it's at the Fort Wilderness Resort, or the Fort Wilderness Campgrounds. I'm sorry, Fort Wilderness Campgrounds, and I would recommend doing that. The food's great, the entertainment's great, and you can tell them Kyle said hi. They'll probably smile, or Ashley.
That's awesome. Yeah. It's on. No, I took it off my vision board for the next year, but I did have Disney on my vision board because I want to take my kids, but I'm expecting again, and I'm due at the end of May. So the timing for that is just not good right now, but I'm hoping maybe sometime in 2025 we'll be able to go, because my oldest will be 5 then, and I think she'll really enjoy it and remember a lot of the trip then.
Oh, that'll be a great age. I'm going to ask you though about your vision board. Do you only keep it for 1 year?
Yeah.
Like it's only meant to be for that year?
So I've done both. I try and be more specific with it because it helps me stay focused. Otherwise, there would probably be a picture of the whole world, because I would love to see it all. And I need to be a little bit more specific, much like a budget. So right now, I just have things on it that I would like to do in the next 12 months. And I made it in the summer of last year. So we haven't actually checked anything off yet. I still have a lot of work to do.
It's all good. That's great. I was just curious.
Yeah. Yeah. What about you? Do you have a vision board as well?
I don't have a vision board. I just have a lot of notebooks and a journal. And
Mm,
so notebooks are scattered, and I dump notes into like Google Sheets or things sometimes, be like, oh, okay, I want to do these and these and these. Um, but
mm,
no, I've never done like a vision board, a full-on vision board.
hmm. It's kind of fun to see everything kind of come to life, but it is definitely a process to, well, yeah, it's a bit of a process to put together. Here, I'll see if I can turn my computer around and show you. So this is
Oh
it
yeah, I
here.
love it.
There's a lot of stuff on it, including my
That's
partner's
cool.
resignation letter that I created 6 months ago with a future date on it. I don't know about that one, but we were being optimistic. I will ask you though, since you do a lot of journaling, if you have any journal prompts that really help focus in on kind of financial goals.
Oh my gosh. Journal prompts that focus on. So it's funny that you ask, because I took writing prompts and then I flipped them into
Mhm.
financial questions. I have some
Oh,
sitting on my
okay,
desk. I mean, I can practice trying to do this right here, but the
sure.
one that I originally had, I lost these. But it was Wordsmith deck, less writer's block, more writing. My wife got me these and I lost them at a hotel that I was at. Um,
Oh no.
right? So, like this writing prompt is the most unfair thing about capitalism is, and so I think that could be a good writing prompt, but just put a financial spin on it,
Yeah.
because nothing says that a writing prompt has to be specific. The idea is that it prompts, and so um,
Hmm.
uh, if you found out you would die in a year, describe what you would do for the next 365. I think flipping that into a
Mm-hmm.
financial, because there would be financial limitations, right? So what's important to you? What do you value? What do you really want your life to look like? So while I
Mm-hmm.
don't have a specific one, I would encourage anybody to take any writing prompt and say, how do I turn this into a financial question? I did several of these on TikTok. I like took a writing prompt and then I flipped it into a financial question and answered it myself. And then, and
Mm-hmm.
asked other people kind of what they thought.
That's neat. That would be kind of an interesting lead magnet for you.
Oh yeah. Writing prompts for, to get your financial brain going.
Yeah,
I think it would be
yeah.
good because it would get
Uh,
people to healthily talk to themselves about money in a way that's safe
yes.
and in a way
And
that's
you know
more
what I find when I
productive.
do, yes. And I find when I do exercises like that too, it gets me really, I'm going to say excited, although I'm not sure that's the right word. But then I end up going, hey, babe, so this is a question that I was asking myself, and this is what I, came up with, what would you say? So then it actually opens the dialogue to create that healthier money conversation or mental health, whatever it is, the topic that we're
Sure.
talking about. So that would be, yeah, interesting for a lot of people, I think. So before we wrap up, I just wanted to know if you had any other final pieces of wisdom that you wanted to share with people about what we've been talking about today.
Well, I think this ties really well into what we were just talking about. So, when my wife and I were going through marriage prep, there was a piece of wisdom that we got that I hadn't heard before, and it kind of changed my whole uh, world, right? And so the phrase was, "Don't get furious, get curious." And so the
Mm,
idea is that if you get to a place where because you're going to get upset, you're going to get frustrated with your spouse. Again, this was in marriage prep that we heard about this. But encouraging, before you get to that place where you're really angry, stop and ask yourself why you're so upset. Try to figure out really what it is at the core that's bothering you. So if there are little um I I don't know why. So this just randomly came to mind when my wife and I first started dating. We met each other in Japan. We were doing a tour in Japan, and we learned about each other very quickly because it was just us on this tour of 8 people.
mhm,
And so one of the things that I noticed was that she called her folks what seemed like all the time. I was like, why are you talking to your folks all the time? And it bugged me. But in the moment I was like, but how could I possibly be mad at that? I can't be mad at you talking
mm,
to your folks and being closer. I was one of those who talked to my folks every week or every several days, and that was just kind of the norm. But for some reason I
mhm,
was like, why does this bother me? And so later, when we were going through marriage prep and heard about that phrase, I was like, oh, okay, well, that makes more sense to really kind of dive in. Okay, why does that Why does that bother you? Why does it upset you? That being said,
Mm.
I think that you can flip that and use that to, kind of prompt yourself when it comes to money as well. So for so long, I was so angry about money, hated it. I loved having it. But whenever it was brought up,
Mm.
whenever people would buy things that I couldn't, I would feel like it was flaunting, and it would just make me upset. Money would make me angry. I realized
Mm.
later that it wasn't making me angry. I just didn't understand it. I wasn't asking any
Mm.
questions. And so when I sign off my emails or sign off letters, now what I'll say is stay curious. I just encourage you
Oh, I like that.
to stay inquisitive about the good and the bad, because they both have something to teach. I think it was Matthew McConaughey who said, I don't have any regrets because those are just choices I haven't learned from. And so I encourage you to,
Mm.
if there's something that you do deeply regret, or there's something bad, then if you start asking questions, even safely to yourself, I don't think we need to be afraid of ourselves. I think we need to be more afraid of losing ourselves. And so being inquisitive helps kind of keep that in check. And so I would encourage people to stay curious.
I love that. I like that a lot. So for the people who are listening and they're like, this was awesome, I need more of Kyle's wisdom, how can they find you?
So I'm on all the socials. I spend most of my time probably on TikTok, but you can find me at Financial Flippers. Because again, we're, just the idea of flipping the script of your financial story and the way you talk to yourself about money, and www.financialflippers.com online.
Wonderful. And I will link those in the show notes for anyone that wants easy access to that. So thank you so much for joining me today, Kyle. I know I personally learned a lot, and I'm sure that everyone else listening did as well. And I hope that we're able to connect again in the future.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. And to all our listeners, I will see you again next week.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Go Get Great. I hope you found some useful tips and tricks that can help you make life and business work together. If what I said resonates with you, please share it on social media, and don't forget to tag at Brittany Miller Socials so that I can celebrate you for taking those first steps towards achieving greatness. Remember, success doesn't happen overnight. It takes dedication, hard work, and a lot of spirit. So don't be afraid to dream big and go after what you want. Keep striving for greatness. You get closer with every step forward, no matter how small they may seem. Until next time, go get great.